My beloved child, stop for one moment, because the words you are about to hear carry the weight of a message that has been held back for far too long. Stay with me. Do not let your attention drift, because what appears at first to be a desperate plea is hiding a revelation far greater than you expect. Somewhere beneath the silence between you and the person your heart still recognizes, a decision is being made. It is not a decision born from anger, and it is not the ending you may fear. It is the moment when someone who has carried unspoken feelings for too long finally reaches the edge of their silence. Their heart is saying, "Please open this before I give up. I cannot do this anymore." But listen carefully, they are not giving up on love. They are giving up on pretending that your absence does not affect them. They are giving up on hiding behind pride. They are giving up on rehearsing the truth in an empty room while showing the world a face that says everything is fine. Don't look away now. What comes next changes everything, because the message they want you to open is not simply made of words. It contains a confession, a forgotten promise, and the reason they have been acting so differently. For days, they have opened the same conversation on their phone, typed your name, written several lines, and then erased every word before sending it. Each time, their finger hovered over the final button, but an old fear whispered, "What if you waited too long? What if they no longer care? What if your truth arrives after their heart has closed?" Yet tonight, something unusual interrupted that fear. They were sitting alone near a window when a small light appeared in the reflection of the glass. At first, they believed it was only a passing car, but the light remained still while everything else moved. Beside it, their own reflection looked unfamiliar. Not because their face had changed, but because they could no longer hide the exhaustion in their eyes. On the table was an unopened envelope they had carried from one home to another, through changing seasons, unanswered conversations, and countless attempts to move forward. Your name was written across it. The ink had faded slightly, but the feeling behind it had not. That envelope is the first symbol in this story, and your answer is closer than you think. They wrote it during a night when they almost told you everything. Inside were the words they were too afraid to speak, the exact moment they realized you were not temporary, the truth about why they stepped away, and the promise they silently made when they believed they would eventually return. This is where the story begins. Not at the distance. Not at the misunderstanding. Not even at the day communication became uncertain. It begins with that sealed envelope and with a person who has finally realized that keeping it closed has cost them more than opening it ever could. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you beyond the first confession. The shocking part is that they did not rediscover the envelope by accident. Earlier that day, they had been searching through a drawer for something ordinary when an old key fell onto the floor. The key belonged to a small wooden box they had not opened in a very long time. Their first instinct was to place it back and continue searching, but the key landed beside a pale blue thread tied around the envelope. That thread was once wrapped around something you gave them, something simple that meant very little to anyone else but carried an entire memory for them. The moment they touched it, a sentence you once spoke returned with astonishing clarity. If you ever lose your way, return to what was true before fear became louder than your heart. They had forgotten the exact day you said it, but they had never forgotten how safe they felt hearing it. Don't skip. This detail matters, because they had recently convinced themselves that moving on was the mature choice. They tried filling their days with noise. They stayed busy, laughed when expected, answered people with short and polished words, and avoided every place that reminded them of you. But healing did not come through avoidance. The more they tried to erase your presence, the more clearly they recognized the difference between forgetting someone and learning how deeply that person changed them. Your memory did not chase them. It waited quietly in familiar songs, in a certain hour of evening, in the scent of rain against warm ground, and in the way they instinctively reached for their phone when something beautiful happened. They began noticing a repeated pattern. Whenever they decided never to contact you again, something connected to you appeared within hours. A phrase you often used would be spoken by a stranger. A song would begin at the exact line that reminded them of your last meaningful conversation. A clock would display the same number they once associated with a private promise. They dismissed each moment as coincidence until 3 separate signs appeared in a single day. First came the old key. Then the blue thread. Finally, beneath the wooden box, they discovered a photograph they had believed was lost. The photograph did not show a perfect moment. That is what made it powerful. You were both caught between laughter and surprise. Neither of you prepared, neither of you performing. Looking at it, they saw what fear had hidden from them. With you, they had once been completely unguarded. The person in that photograph was not confused. That person knew where their heart felt at home. Stay with me, because this spiritual symbolism is leading to an emotional twist they never expected. They placed the photograph beside the envelope and opened the wooden box. Inside was a small silver charm shaped like a doorway. They had bought it long ago but never gave it to you. The doorway represented a future they wanted to invite you into, yet every time the opportunity came, they delayed. They believed they needed to become flawless before deserving the love they felt. They thought they had to repair every insecurity, achieve every goal, and silence every doubt before standing before you honestly. But perfection never arrived. Time continued moving, while the doorway remained locked inside a box. And now their heart is saying, "Please open this before I give up." Not because their love has disappeared, but because they are exhausted from living on the wrong side of a door they built themselves. Don't look away now. At this very point in the story, they made a choice. They picked up the envelope, placed the key on top of it, and decided they would finally read the words aloud. Their voice trembled at the first sentence. The letter began, "If you are hearing this, it means I finally became brave enough to stop running from the only truth that never changed." But that was not the sentence that overwhelmed them. Farther down the page was a confession they themselves had forgotten writing. It said, "If I ever become distant, please do not mistake my fear for a lack of love. Sometimes I disappear from the places that matter most because I am terrified of being seen completely." Those words broke through the story they had been telling themselves. For months, they had claimed the distance was necessary. They said the timing was wrong. They said you wanted different things. They said the connection had become too complicated. Yet the letter exposed a much simpler truth: they were frightened by how real it felt. You saw through the version of them designed to impress everyone else. You recognized the quiet sadness behind their smile. You noticed when their energy changed before they spoke a word. Being loved that deeply felt beautiful, but it also meant they could no longer hide. So they stepped back, not because you were insufficient, but because your love reached a place they had spent years protecting. What comes next changes everything, because the envelope contains another page, and on that page is the name of a person who knew the truth before either of you understood it. That name belonged to someone who once sat across from your soulmate during a conversation they never told you about. It happened shortly before the distance began. Your soulmate had gone there seeking reassurance that stepping away was the right decision, fully expecting to hear that intense connections are temporary and that time would make everything easier. Instead, the person listened quietly and asked one question. When you imagine never speaking to them again, do you feel peaceful, or do you merely feel protected? Your soulmate could not answer. They looked down, changed the subject, and pretended the question was too dramatic. But the silence revealed everything. Protection was not peace. Distance had reduced the immediate risk of vulnerability, but it had not brought calm. It had created a quiet emptiness that followed them into every room. The person across from them saw this and offered a warning wrapped in gentleness. One day, the wall you built to avoid being hurt may become the same wall that keeps you from the love you asked for. Those words were written on the second page of the letter. Don't skip, because until tonight, your soulmate had never understood why they preserved that sentence. Now, holding the faded paper beneath the window light, they finally saw it. They were not waiting for a perfect moment to reach you. They were waiting for a guarantee that they would not be rejected, misunderstood, or asked to explain every mistake. But love rarely arrives with guarantees. It asks for truth before certainty. It asks a person to step forward while their hands are still trembling. Stay with me. Your soulmate folded the letter again, but this time they did not return it to the box. They placed it beside their phone and opened your conversation. Their first message contained only 4 words, "Are you still awake?" They stared at it for several minutes, then erased it. The second message said, "I need to explain." That disappeared too. The third attempt was longer. "I know I may not have the right to ask you to listen, but there is something you deserve to hear from me a long time ago." Their finger hovered again. Fear returned, but now it had a rival, the possibility of losing you permanently because of words never spoken. They stood, walked across the room, came back, and read the letter from the beginning. When they reached the line about hiding from the places that matter most, something inside them shifted. They began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was telling the truth before fear edited it. So they wrote the words at the center of this message, "Please open this before I give up. I cannot do this anymore." Yet the next sentence, the one hidden beyond the title, changes its meaning completely. "I cannot keep acting as if losing you would be easier than admitting I still care. Don't look away now." That is the emotional twist. The plea is not a threat, and it is not meant to place a burden upon you. It is the sound of surrender, not surrendering love, but surrendering the performance. They can no longer pretend your name feels ordinary. They can no longer tell friends they are unaffected while quietly checking whether you have appeared. They can no longer dismiss the memories that return whenever life becomes still. They can no longer build a future while refusing to acknowledge the person who changed how that future once looked. Something huge is waiting for you, because after writing the message, they reached for the silver doorway charm. For the first time, they examined the back and discovered a tiny engraving. They had forgotten requesting it when they bought the charm. The engraving contained 2 words, "Begin again." The sight of them left your soulmate motionless. A doorway does not promise that everything beyond it will be easy. It simply offers an opening. And "begin again" does not mean returning to the exact place where pain occurred. It means entering with greater honesty, clearer boundaries, and the wisdom earned through distance. This spiritual symbol became their answer. They did not need to recreate the past. They needed to decide whether truth could create a different future. Your answer is closer than you think, but before it appears, you must understand what happened during the days when you believed they had forgotten you. They did not speak your name openly, yet they carried invisible conversations with you everywhere. When they made a difficult choice, they wondered what you would say. When they achieved something, the excitement felt incomplete because they could not tell you. When they felt uncertain, they remembered how you once listened without rushing to repair them. The world continued seeing the composed version of this person, but behind that composure was a growing realization: you had not merely occupied a chapter of their life, you had influenced the language in which they understood love. Still, there was one obstacle. They believed you had already discovered something about them, something that could make their explanation arrive too late. This belief came from a conversation they overheard. Someone mentioned your name and said you had finally closed the door. Your soulmate did not ask what those words meant. They assumed the worst. They imagined you had released every feeling, removed every memory, and decided never to look back. That assumption kept them silent for weeks. But the truth behind that phrase was very different. The door you closed was not the door to love. It was the door to confusion. You were no longer willing to stand inside uncertainty, guessing what silence meant. You had not demanded perfection, you had simply needed clarity. Your soulmate did not know this. From where they stood, your strength looked like finality. Your quietness looked like indifference. Your healing looked like proof that they had become irrelevant. This is where the story begins again, because the same silence was telling each of you opposite stories. You believed their distance meant they did not care. They believed your dignity meant you no longer wanted them. Two hearts were protecting themselves from rejection while privately grieving a connection neither had fully released. Stay till the end, because the mystery is not only whether the message will be opened. The deeper mystery is what your soulmate placed inside it after the words, "I cannot do this anymore." They attached a photograph. Not the old photograph from the box, but a new image taken that very evening. In it, the envelope rested beside the key, the blue thread, and the silver doorway charm. Beneath the objects, they placed a handwritten note: "These are the things I kept when I was pretending I had let go." They wanted you to see evidence that their silence was not emptiness. It was a room filled with memories they were too afraid to enter. But before sending the image, they noticed something in the corner of the photograph. A reflection appeared in the silver charm. It looked like a narrow streak of golden light crossing the engraved words, "Begin again." The light had not been visible to their eyes. It appeared only in the photograph. They zoomed in, thinking it was a flaw, but the streak formed the shape of an open path. For them, it felt like a spiritual reminder: truth had already begun creating a way forward. Don't skip. The surprising revelation is that this was not the first time that same golden streak appeared in a photograph connected to you. Your soulmate searched through older images and found it again in the unguarded photograph of you together. Near the edge of the frame, almost hidden by sunlight, was the same narrow line. Years earlier, neither of you noticed it. Tonight, it appeared like a thread connecting the past to the present. Not proof of a predetermined ending, but a symbol of something genuine that fear had failed to erase. They sat down, overwhelmed by the timing. The old key opened the box. The box revealed the letter. The letter revealed the truth. The charm revealed the words. And the photograph revealed the line of light. One object led to another as if the entire evening had been arranged to bring them to a single decision: speak now, or continue living inside a misunderstanding. What comes next changes everything. They pressed send. For 1 second, the message remained beside a small symbol showing that it had not yet been delivered. Then the phone lost its connection. The message stayed suspended, written, chosen, released from their hands, but not yet carried to you. That delay felt unbearable. They walked toward the window and whispered, "If there is still a path between us, let this reach them at the right moment." When the connection returned, the message changed status. It had been delivered. But it had not been opened. Your soulmate watched the screen, and every passing second seemed to hold an entire lifetime. They imagined you seeing their name and turning away. They imagined the message arriving while you were busy. They imagined you reading the first line and deciding the past was better left untouched. Yet none of those possibilities carried the force of what actually happened next. Before the message could be opened, your soulmate received a call from the person whose name appeared on the second page of the letter, the same person who once asked whether distance brought peace or merely protection. They had not spoken in months. There was no clear reason for the call to happen at that exact moment. Your soulmate answered, and the voice on the other side said, "I had a feeling tonight was the night you would finally tell the truth." Stay with me, because that caller knew something your soulmate did not know. Something about you. Something you had said when you believed the story was already over. The caller did not begin with an explanation. Instead, they asked your soulmate whether the message had been sent. Your soulmate looked at the screen and quietly said yes. There was a long pause, followed by a sentence that made the room feel suddenly still. "Then you need to know that they never closed the door on love. They closed the door on being left in the dark." Those words shattered the final excuse your soulmate had been using to remain hidden. For so long, they believed your boundaries were evidence that your feelings had ended. Now they understood that your boundaries were evidence that your heart had learned its value. You did not become cold. You became clear. You did not stop caring. You stopped abandoning yourself while waiting for someone else to choose courage. Don't look away now. This distinction changes everything, because your soulmate had prepared to ask whether you still loved them, but the real question was whether they were finally ready to love you in a way that did not require you to live inside uncertainty. The caller continued, "If you want another chance, do not arrive with promises designed to create a moment. Arrive with truth strong enough to create consistency." Your soulmate lowered their eyes toward the letter. They realized the message they had sent was only the doorway, not the destination. A confession might capture attention, but only changed behavior could rebuild trust. A beautiful sentence might reopen communication, but only patience could make that communication safe. Something huge is waiting for you, and it is not simply the revelation that they still care. It is the revelation that they have finally begun understanding what caring must become. They have been thinking about the apology you never demanded but always deserved. Not an apology filled with excuses. Not words that blame timing, pressure, confusion, or the influence of others. A true apology that says, "I allowed fear to make decisions that affected both of us. I mistook silence for protection, and I left you carrying questions that were mine to answer." They wrote that sentence beneath the photograph before the message was delivered, but they placed it near the bottom, afraid you might never reach it. That is why the plea at the beginning says, "Please open this before I give up." They fear you will judge the entire message by the first few words and never discover the truth waiting at the end. Stay till the end, because the same is true for this story. The most powerful revelation has not appeared yet. After the call ended, your soulmate returned to the window. The room looked unchanged, but they no longer felt like the person who had entered it. The unopened envelope was finally open. The hidden charm was finally visible. The unsent truth was finally on its way. Yet the screen still showed that their message had not been read. They placed the phone face down and decided not to stare at it. For the first time, they understood that sending truth did not give them control over your response. You were allowed to take your time. You were allowed to protect your peace. You were allowed to ask questions, to require honesty, or even to remain silent until you felt ready. Their task was not to force an outcome. Their task was to stop hiding. This is where the story begins, not with pursuit, but with responsibility. Not with grand promises, but with a person finally standing in the light of what they feel. They picked up the old letter once more and noticed that its final page was folded inward. The fold had become so flat that it looked like the edge of the paper. They carefully opened it and found a paragraph they had not read in years. The handwriting was rushed, almost as if their younger self feared courage would vanish before the sentence was finished. It said, "There may come a day when I tell myself it is too late. If that day arrives, I hope something reminds me that honesty offered late is still kinder than silence offered forever. I cannot demand their return, but I can make sure they never have to wonder whether they mattered." Your soulmate covered their mouth and closed their eyes. The person they had been years ago had written instructions for the person they would become tonight. That was the once-in-a-lifetime revelation. The letter was not only written to you. It was also written forward through time to themselves. It waited inside the box until they became ready to understand it. The key did more than open a lock. It opened a truth they had preserved without knowing why. The blue thread did more than hold paper together. It connected a forgotten promise to the present moment. The doorway charm did more than represent a future. It revealed that beginnings remain possible when honesty arrives with humility. And the golden line in the photographs did more than catch light. It became a symbol of the path that remains visible only when fear stops blocking it. Your answer is closer than you think, because at that exact moment, the phone lit up. Your soulmate turned slowly, afraid to hope. The message status had changed. You had opened it. Their heartbeat quickened, but there was no immediate reply. 1 minute passed. Then another. They imagined you reading the words carefully, reaching the photograph, recognizing the old blue thread, and seeing the charm that was once meant for you. They wondered whether you remembered the sentence about returning to what was true before fear became louder than the heart. They wondered if the message reopened sadness or gave language to questions you had carried alone. They wanted to send another message, but stopped. This time, they chose patience over panic. They would not crowd your silence with pressure. They would allow the truth to reach you completely. Don't skip, because while they waited, another mystery appeared. A small typing symbol flashed on the screen, then vanished. It returned, stayed for several seconds, and disappeared again. You were writing something, erasing it, and beginning again, mirroring every moment they had spent doing the same. Without seeing a single word, your soulmate realized you had also carried more than you had revealed. Your quietness had not been empty either. Two people were now standing on opposite sides of the same message, both trying to find language strong enough to cross the distance. What comes next changes everything, but not in the way your soulmate expects. They believe your response will decide whether the relationship can begin again. Yet your response will reveal something even deeper. You discovered the existence of that envelope before tonight. Months ago, during a conversation with the same caller, you heard that your name had once been written on a letter that was never delivered. You did not ask to see it. You did not chase it. You simply said, "If those words are truly meant for me, they will arrive when the person who wrote them is ready to live by them." That sentence is what the caller remembered tonight. That is why they called your soulmate at the precise moment the message was sent. They knew the letter had finally moved from memory into action. Stay with me. Your soulmate does not yet know you said those words. They only know the typing symbol has appeared again, and this time it is not disappearing. They stand beside the window, holding the silver doorway charm in one hand while the other rests near the phone. The golden reflection has faded, but a quiet certainty has taken its place. Whatever you say, the age of hiding is over. If your answer is hopeful, they are prepared to move slowly and honestly. If your answer is cautious, they are prepared to listen. If your answer contains hurt, they are prepared to acknowledge it without defending themselves. Their plea was never supposed to make you responsible for rescuing them. It was meant to rescue the truth from another night of silence. "Please open this before I give up" now carries its full meaning. "Please see who I am before I give up the mask. Please hear what I should have said before I give up another day to fear. Please understand that I cannot keep living as though this connection meant nothing." Something huge is waiting for you, because your message is finally about to appear on their screen. The typing stops. The phone remains still. Then the first line arrives. Your soulmate reads it once, then again, unable to breathe past the emotion rising in their chest. You have not written, "It is too late." You have not written, "Forget me." Your first line says, "I opened your message, but before I answer, there is something you need to know about the night you walked away." Their hand tightens around the doorway charm. The mystery has turned. Until now, they believed they were the only one carrying a hidden truth. They believed the letter contained the final missing piece. But your reply reveals that another event occurred on the night the distance began, an event they never witnessed, a conversation they never heard, and a choice you made without telling anyone. Don't look away now. What comes next changes everything. On that night, after your soulmate stepped away, you received something that should have reached them instead. It was a message from a person connected to their past, and the words inside it explained why fear suddenly became louder than love. You kept that message, not to use it against them, but because you believed the truth would one day need to be seen. Tonight, for the first time, you are ready to reveal it. Your soulmate watches as another line appears. You thought you left because you were afraid, but someone quietly helped create that fear. The room falls silent. The key, the envelope, the thread, and the silver doorway now seem like pieces of a much larger design. Their distance was not caused by one misunderstanding. Someone knew exactly which insecurity to awaken, exactly which doubt to repeat, and exactly how to make love feel like a risk. But that person made one mistake: they assumed the truth would remain sealed forever. Stay till the end. The unopened letter has finally been read, but another message is about to be opened, and the name attached to it will reveal why your soulmate nearly gave up before finding the courage to return.